Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, I am honored to welcome a remarkable friend and person to the show, Christina Keys. Christina Keys is the CEO and founder of Keys for Caregiving. Welcome, Christina.
It's an honor to be here, Lance. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure. I want to start with going back a ways in your story because, you have an incredible story about how you really got into the space and while you're doing what you're doing now. But for those that may not be familiar with it, let's kind of start back at the beginning of your care journey because it wasn't just one person you were caring for. It eventually became two. So I'll kind of turn it over and let you share your journey.
All right. Well, yeah, I started out in 2013. I was in tech. I had a very robust life. I had my partner I was with. I was working, a job. I was making over $100,000 a year, traveling, super independent, healthy, playing on 3 softball teams. And, it was March 16th, 2013, 3:42 p.m. I was in the grocery store shopping with my personal trainer because I could afford one of those at that time. And I got the call that my mother had a life-changing stroke and she wasn't expected to live. And I went to Seattle, which was 3 hours away, and walked in and she was on life support. And I didn't know that day that I was going to become a caregiver. She survived the stroke. She was in the hospital for I think almost 4 months. And I lived with her in that hospital. And, the whole time, because I don't have children, I was in tech. And I didn't know how to care for anybody. I wasn't familiar with the care industry or anything. And the whole time I was asking, because my mother was at that time paralyzed from the neck down. She couldn't talk. I had to help teach her how to talk. We had to make it so she could use one of her sides of her body. And the whole time I was asking, how do I do this? What do I do? What do I do when she's released from the hospital? I didn't even know the word discharged, and, they let me wheel her out of that hospital with her being paralyzed on one side. And they gave me a list of in-home care agencies and senior living. But they never told me in-home care wasn't covered, right? They didn't tell me what that entailed or anything. And I was very diligent, even the times that I was tired, I would say, hey, I haven't really slept. Can I record this? So I went home and I took my mom home, and all of a sudden I was thrown into not only working full time, but being a care manager, being a, physical therapist, occupational therapist, nurse, doctor, CNA, all of these things. And through that care journey, 3 years in, I had to give up my career, and my last doctor's appointment at that job, they told me that the stress from caregiving, trying to figure it out on my own, because I wasn't able to find resources. I was asking doctors, medical staff. They told me, Christina, your body's literally shutting down. You have maybe 6 months to live. We don't even expect you to live that long. I was sleeping maybe 5 to 10 hours a week. I had gotten diabetes, high blood pressure, gained 100 pounds because I completely forgot about myself, taking care of my mom. And, it's also very stressful because, my mother and I had had a very tumultuous relationship growing up. She was my abuser. And now, I loved her. I didn't want her to pass. And, but I also was stuck in this place of, all the therapy and everything I'd gone through, the abuse was now present again, everything except for the physical abuse. And so, it was a rough journey, and, I had to change my life. And when I changed my life, I had to change my career also. I went into the retirement and senior industry, and, I wound up learning that there was a lot of resources in our town, and started my journey there. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But in the meantime, I had this relationship that I had been with my partner, Terry. He and I had been together since 2002. And in 2019, our relationship just had not survived my caregiving because I had changed a lot, and so we broke up, decided to separate, but we were very good friends, very much loved each other, but just were not a couple anymore. Well, 5 months later, he had a stroke, and I became his caregiver as well. And so here I was caring for him. He had had a different kind of stroke, and then he was having multiple strokes. He had had some different complications, and he was on Medicaid. And my mother had had a more severe stroke with paralyzation and other medical complications, and she was on Medicare. So I was getting all kinds of education on how to do this. And so and I was getting a very severe education on how to function, on being able to get up every day when you're in the middle of heartbreak,
Right.
when you're in the middle of, I don't know how to do this. And, the way I describe caregiving is it's like being told to fly a plane, well, building a plane with no instruction manual, no toolbox, and frankly, being afraid of heights.
Yeah.
That's my explanation of caregiving. And that's what I was doing on a daily basis, and trying to keep a roof over my head, and trying to just exist as a person.
Right.
And that's what a lot of caregivers go through.
Yeah, I want to, before we move on, Christina, I want to touch on something that you had mentioned, having a tumultuous relationship with a parent, or it could even be a spouse, whatever the example, and then being thrust into that role of being their caregiver. I think that doesn't get really talked about enough, or really thought about. Usually it's, my dad or my mom did everything for me, and they were the greatest parents, and of course I'm going to jump in and do everything I can for them now. But that's not always the case for families.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an abusive father, or abusive mother, or neglectful, or, any horrible situation. And then now that child is being called upon to be that loved one, that parent's caregiver. How do you think your relationship prior to your mom needing you as a caregiver to when she did need you, did any of that play or add anything into your caregiving journey?
It did, absolutely. I left home when I was 15 years old because the abuse was just too much, and I couldn't handle it anymore. I was already working, so I was able to afford a place on my own when I was, in high school. And I did learn skills on how to be strong and how to survive living in a home full of domestic violence, right? And so, once I did that, I also, had to get a lot of counseling. I had to get a lot of therapy. I had to learn how to, set boundaries, because I did want a relationship with my mother. I think when we have parents, or when we make a commitment to somebody for life, for marriage, right, it's very hard for us to accept that that person doesn't love us, and it's hard on our self-esteem, right? So obviously I wanted my mother to love me. And so, and if she didn't, I wanted to be comfortable with that in my life. And I wanted my side of the street to be clean also. So I had to go through a lot of therapy. I had to learn how to set boundaries. And most importantly, I had to learn how to forgive. In that journey, I had to forgive my mother, but I also had to forgive my mother as a woman first. I had become an adult, and I realized that I wasn't perfect as an adult. So I had to allow my mother to be forgiven as a mother. I had to allow her to be a woman, right? Not just my mom, right? And I also had to realize that as a mother, she did the best she could, and forgive her. But most importantly, just like we have to redefine normal when we're a caregiver, I had to redefine what forgiveness was for me, because I used to think forgiveness was, if I forgave you, that meant that everything you did was excused. And if I forgave you, that meant that you could continue to do that to me as long as you said, I'm sorry. Or if I forgave you, that made you a completely different person, or I had to just take the abuse still, right? That is not what forgiveness is. I had to redefine it for myself and understand that forgiveness was just a place in my heart where I was no longer waiting for her to say I'm sorry or her to make it right. It was a place for me to be able to lay my head down on the pillow at night and be able to have comfort in I need to be okay with it and I need to set boundaries for me, right? So that was the first part of it. And then learning how to set boundaries. Once I became my mother's caregiver, right? I had to learn how to set boundaries with myself because obviously, once, before she had her stroke, I was able to set boundaries with her. And that's how we were able to mend our relationship because I could say, Mom, if you do this, this will happen. And that was successful, right? After she had her stroke, with her memory issues, the cognitive impairment she had, I could not say, like, if you do this, this will happen. So I had to learn how to set boundaries with myself and really, really be committed to those.
What advice would you give to maybe somebody watching or listening in on this right now, Christina, where maybe they're starting to see the signs where mom or dad is needing help or the day for help being needed is fast approaching, and maybe they're checked out and they're saying there's no way I could help take care of that man or that woman after what they put me through as a child. You did it though, right? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to say, would you do anything differently if you had to go back and make that decision all over again?
Honestly, I think the only thing I would have done differently is get support earlier on, but
But you would still do it.
I would do it again and again because it was beautiful, right? But what I need to tell, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but what I need to tell people that is if you are a family member or a spouse or somebody that has been in an abusive situation, and then a care situation comes up, you are not required to care for them. You have a choice.
You have a choice.
You have a choice. I made the choice. No, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks of you. You have a choice and it's okay to choose you and not be in that abusive situation, right? If you do make the choice that I made to care for somebody who used to be your abuser, what I would say to you is please get as much support as you can. And I understand that caregiving takes a lot of your time and it also takes a lot of your mind, and you're in reaction mode and you're scared and you're consumed with what do I do in this learning curve. There are so many ways for you to get support that you don't have to physically be gone, even if it's just something as simple as listening to a podcast like one of the ones on All Home Care Matters, where you can hear that you're not alone and get some advice. There's hotlines like the Caregiver Action Network has hotlines. There are care coaches. A lot of therapists now do phone call and Zoom meetings. There's even social media groups that you can get on there and chat with people. So I would say if you make that choice to care for a loved one who, or somebody in your life, doesn't necessarily have to be a loved one. And some people hate that term loved one if it's somebody who that's been abusive to them, right? If you choose to care for somebody who was at one time was your abuser and probably still will be abusive in some way, mentally or emotionally on that care journey, I would say it's very important for you to have some sort of support along the way. And frankly, if you don't know how to get that, you can certainly reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to share with you some of the ways to find that support.
Well, and we're going to have the links and everything in our show notes. And this is a perfect segue for that. First, we want to put this up on the screen. Where would you like people to reach out at for you?
Well, you can find me at ChristinaKeys.com. My company is called Keys for Caregiving. Last name is Keys, right? And ChristinaKeys.com. You can find me there. All the social media platforms are on that website as well. I've also got a text line that you can text me at. And the text line is 360-230-7736. And anybody in the United States can text me there with questions. If you need directions or help, if you need to find some of my platforms, you can certainly find me there. And I'm on all the social media platforms as well, Keys for Caregiving.
Well, I want to talk about Keys for Caregiving because that's part of the reason we're having you on here. You just recently launched Keys for Caregiving. Why don't you go through and kind of run through what that all is? Because it's more than just coaching and support. You're doing speaking engagements, all sorts of things. Why don't you kind of walk us through Keys for Caregiving and what it's all about?
Well, Keys for Caregiving, first of all, it did just officially launch, right? But it's been building since 2017, right? 2017, what happened was when I went into the care space industry, I found all of these great resources in my local town. And I started putting on classes, 4 to 6 classes a month. I was bringing in experts to share with people about the resources in town and how to use those resources. I started a yearly resource and fair for family caregivers. I started events for family caregivers. I started a nonprofit for family caregivers. That was a hyper local model. And that hyper local model actually got national coverage and started winning awards very soon, not because I'm so great, not because the nonprofit was so great, but because the need was so great. When I've talked to family caregivers, I've been in large collectives of family caregivers, all across the United States. And when the question comes up, what's the biggest challenge for you? They always say finding resources in my own town, right? And so that model got national coverage. And then a large company in the care space asked me to come on with them, duplicate that model across the United States. I was able to do that, build caregiver support communities all across the United States, also build a team of over, 110 caregiver champions all across the United States. And while I was doing that, I was also doing a lot of advocacy work and speaking for amazing companies like Caring Across Generations and Washington Care Funds, and speaking all across the United States, not just telling my story, but also educating people on how to build community in their towns, how to work collaboratively to make a positive change for family caregivers, how to reach family caregivers, because I think a lot of times people know how to market to the people caregivers are caring for, but we tend to be invisible, right? They forget who's taking the people into the appointments or who's signing the checks or who's making the decisions, right? And so now with that grew so much and the demand grew so much that it was really time for me to expand that, because I wanted to do something not just with one company, but with a larger company. And my goal in the end is really to build one of the biggest communities that we've ever seen, that's really going to help as many family caregivers and empower as many family caregivers as possible. And so what I do now is not only still continue to speak all over, whether it be on stages or in people's businesses with their employees, but also I do a lot of advocacy work. I just got done having a press conference with the governor here in Washington State. And I also teach a lot of classes and, show up for a lot of webinars and podcasts. And I work collectively to help people expand their business and how they're reaching out to family caregivers and how they're engaging with family caregivers as well.
I got a couple of questions from that. What what are some things you wish that businesses and caregivers would know? Because businesses, I feel like they get so focused on what they're involved with, whether it be a restaurant, a gas station, convenience store, what have you, clothing department store. What if you could spend one day and pass some proclamations or even laws or policies, what would you want to see from businesses?
Well, one thing I see a lot of times with businesses is they start out with this amazing mission,
Mhm.
and they go forth, and the longer they stay in business, sometimes the further they divert from what that original mission was and what their original why was, right? And their original why was created from the heart. And there is a way to make that original why and that original passion work, right? And so I would definitely like them to know that we can still do what you set out to do. in
Right.
a profitable way, if that's what you want to do. And I can help you make that happen. Right. I think that anybody who's working in the care space, it needs to be heart driven, because we are dealing with people who are showing up for love. People don't become family caregivers for many other reasons other than love. They wake up every morning because they love someone, not because, trust me, many family caregivers I talk to, and myself, I don't know how many times we wanted to quit our job as a family caregiver, but we showed up for love, and, I want family caregivers to know that it's not only myself, but there are so many businesses, so many individuals, so many organizations that are really, really, really stepping up to help you, and that you're not alone. I don't know how many family caregivers, including myself, for many years, I thought I was alone. And we really, really aren't. Even in Washington state here, there's, 53 million family caregivers estimated in the United States. Washington state, there's over 800,000. In my city, there is over 500,000 residents, and there are 49,500 known family caregivers, right? So obviously, we're not alone here. And anywhere you go, there's going to be between 10 to 17% of your population are family caregivers. So, and my responsibility, I'm hoping that one day we will able to just work more collectively to make a change. And I understand that there's competition. I understand that we all have to be profitable, but there's a way for us to work together to really, really make a difference. And it's going to take us all working together. I mean, I'm very grateful for, what the government does and what the state does, but I've worked on many of those projects, but that is the long haul. Like, if it's going to take us banding together to make quicker changes. And there are people dying out there. The stats for family caregivers are like 30% of family caregivers pass before the person they're caring for. 35% of family caregivers pass within 5 years of the person they're caring for. And family caregivers over the age of 70, 65% of them pass. Like, we are on a clock, right? To save lives, right? And plus, it just doesn't have to be as lonely and as hard as it has been for many of the people who've been on this family caregiving journey and are on it now, you
Yeah.
know?
You may have mentioned it, but you said these businesses, they need to figure out their why. What's your why, Christina?
Oh man. I not only did I almost die, and I had to give up everything, and and I might cry. Forgive
That's okay.
me.
That's all right.
But I remember, caring for my mom, and I don't know how many days I would wake up and just ask God,
Mhm.
God, Buddha, Larry from the convenience store, whoever you believe in, do I have to watch my mom suffer? Why am I suffering? Why is, everything I worked for my whole life gone? Like, why is this happening? Why I keep showing up, and I keep being faithful, and I keep doing this, and I didn't know why, and it was hard. And I would have these moments with mom that were like so beautiful. We would call them team mom moments, where it was like me and mom against the world. Those days where like the doctors weren't listening, or, we couldn't figure out where we were going to get the money to like pay for the medical supplies she need, or, I didn't know how I was going to pay the rent, or, and I would show up and I would do whatever I needed to do, whether it be going to give blood or stand in the food bank line or whatever. And I just, and I see all these other family caregivers, right? I see all these other family caregivers who are showing up every day, and I know how hard it is for them to wake up in the morning.
Right.
It's just as hard as it was for me. And I know how much their heart is breaking. You know, it's like, I remember all those like talks I would have with my mom about end of life. And I would say to her, like, Mom, it's okay, to go or whatever. And inside, like, that little girl inside of me was like saying, no, don't tell her that. Don't go. You know what I mean? So I kind of equate it to that. We're waking up every morning, we're showing up, and inside we are breaking, watching this person we love, slowly decline, watching our life slip away, our social life, our love life, our financial life, our physical life, watching their life go away. There's nothing we can do to control, and our life going away. And you know what? I not only am I going to do everything in my power to make it a little bit more comfortable for any caregiver I come in contact with, but I want any caregiver I come in contact with to know that, like, even if it's not comfortable, like, we're going to walk hand in hand as you do this. And also, you know, it was really traumatic taking care of my mother, and but I also want my mother to know that, like, it was all worth it. And everything I do is another line in that love letter to my mother to say thank you.
Right.
And to, God, the universe, whoever, like, thank you for allowing me to have this gift and to do this and to learn about how amazing life could be, and a new level of love, right? And a new level of me, and a new level of how I get to be of service.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my
Yeah.
that's my why. I'm on a different clock than other people.
Right.
I'm on a different clock, and I wake up in the morning and I don't have to go to work.
Right.
I wake up in the morning and I get to go to work. I get to, a lot of people have love stories in their life,
Right.
and a lot of time it's their marriage or their children. And one of my love stories is my career and what I get to do in this industry and with family caregivers.
Right. Yeah, and it's so rewarding, and I just say, even for family caregivers, I don't know that I could put my finger on a single family caregiver who ever looked back and said, I regret the decision to be that family caregiver for my loved one, or whoever the person happened to be. You get a much more personal relationship with that person. And, hopefully at the end of the day, for any family caregiver that takes upon that role, they can put their head on their pillow at night and have no regrets about what they did. They did the right thing, I want to talk more about Keys for Caregiving, your new company that recently launched.
Yeah.
What do you envision the impact that it's going to have, across the world, really? Because, you're just taking on this torch of, supporting family caregivers, getting resources into the hands of the people that need them, and just being, for all intents and purposes, their person when they need that person to, kind of lean on or vent to or seek help or guidance from. Where do you see the impact, really? What's the ceiling? Is there a ceiling?
I don't see a ceiling, because my responsibility, in my eyes, is to not only be of service along the way, right? To educate people and help people expand what they are doing and what they're learning along the way. But my responsibility is to help people learn how to do exactly what I'm doing, because I can't change anything by myself, right? But we can change things together, right? And so when I see, like, if I'm looking 5 years ahead, I don't see me standing alone. I see me standing with people like you, and people like, Brandon Will, and people like Teresa Wilbanks and Elizabeth Miller, and, Carlos and Felicia, like all of these amazing people. Like, we're standing together, Jen Chan, like, we are standing together, Lori LeBay, like, hand in hand. And what we're doing is we're reaching back our hand to lift more people up and expanding that circle to make the biggest change possible. When I think about community, I think about a community that is constantly reaching their hands out to bring more people in, to make that voice bigger, to make that circle of love and giving and service bigger. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big proponent of, you're stronger together than you are divided. And that's so very true. It's not easy being a family caregiver, and I don't think anybody would ever want to tell you that it is. And if they are, I would question them. And you know that firsthand as well as anyone, Christina. What was it really like for you, though, trying to build this business as a family caregiver and having a professional job as well.
Yeah. I it was it was not necessarily easy. It wasn't easy at all, Lance. It was when I looked at this in 2017, um, I thought, first of all, who am I to dream that big? I literally have no money. I literally like don't even know how to take care of my mom. And the longer I went into caregiving, and I got to that place in 2017 where I'd been told I had, 6 months to live. My body was like shutting down. My body was so heavy with like not only the weight I had gained, but grief and sorrow and just defeat and hopelessness. Um, so, but I'm so grateful for that broken person, right? I'm so grateful for that. I remember sitting on the couch one day and just crying.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking like, I just want nobody to ever feel the way I'm feeling. And I'm so grateful for that broken person because it was that broken person that took one tiny step and one more tiny step
Yeah.
when I didn't believe that it was possible. I didn't believe that I was worthy. I didn't know how it was going to work out. And I just kept doing that, even those days that I didn't want to get out of bed, that I couldn't get out of bed, that I couldn't afford to pay my rent. I remember like the first time I had to go to the food bank, right? Because remember, I came from upper middle class. Like I bought my first house when I was 30 years old as a single woman. If I, the last time I bought a car back then was like, it was a Tuesday. I just felt like buying a new car. I could do those things, right? And then now here I'm standing in a food bank line. I remember I was wearing a hoodie and I felt like I needed to say to the person, like, I swear this is just temporary. It was I'd never had to do that before. And I remember I'm deathly afraid of needles. And I remember somebody had said I needed money because we didn't have money. I didn't have money to pay the family care, the professional caregivers that I had hired. And if I wanted to work or do anything, I had to pay them. And if I didn't care what happened, I had to pay those family caregivers because if you get a good caregiver, you cannot let them go, right? No matter what happens. And I remember going into give blood because somebody said you had to give blood. And I remember laying there that first time and just crying. Like I was, but I knew it's
Right.
all going to matter one day. It's all going to matter one day. And I started that nonprofit with some people. I didn't know how to start a nonprofit. I went from there, and then even just like with like the caregiver Christmas, like I remember caregiver Christmas, which is an event I started, that came from like me laying in bed in November, at the beginning of November, thinking like I'm not looking forward to Christmas. Christmas as a family caregiver sucks, you
Yeah.
know. I was thinking about all the horrible things about Christmas. I'm like, I'm not the only family caregiver who's going through this. So many. And so I thought, let's do a caregiver Christmas. And we wound up making this event like, in the end, like the third year, we were giving away like 1,500 bags to family caregivers. It was a drive-through event. And these caregivers were coming through and we were saying like, we appreciate you as they're coming through. We'd hand them the bag. By the time they got to us, they were crying and having breakdowns because it had been so long since somebody said like we appreciate you, and that was the only gift they were going to get. And it's like every time, every tear that fell from them was like energized me to keep going, and so and there were so many defeats, and watching my mom when it was coming to the end, the last 2022, when I started getting more and more speaking gigs and I started getting more and more advocacy opportunities, and things with that larger company were ramping up. That year, April, my father, who was one of my biggest like cheerleaders and my hero, like he died unexpectedly on April 30th. 5 days later, my cousin, who I was very, very close to, died. And then that was May 5th. May 9th, Terry had his last stroke that I had to put him in adult family home, and he needed 24-hour care. And then my mother went into the hospital. And then November, my birthday, I went into the hospital with my mom one last visit, and she wound up on hospice, and even through all of that, I still, even the talks with my mother was like, don't give up on your dream. Don't give up on your dream. It's important for you to share with people what we've gone through, Tina. And it was not easy because there was a lot of heartbreak. There was a lot of things that said in my head. And I know it's very interesting because I talk to a lot of family caregivers who are now sharing their story, and they'll call me and they'll say, Christina, I don't understand. Like I'm going and I'm doing all these speaking, and then I go home and I don't know how to pay my bills, and I'm ashamed of how I'm living and all this. They say this, right? And I get it. I get it. They're standing up and people are wanting them to share their story, but they're going home and they feel like they're failing, right? I understand that on a core level. And so I had to fight every day those demons in my head that said, why is everything I'm doing not enough to heal my mother, right? Why is everything I'm doing not enough to like heal my life, And but I still had to wake up, and I had to have blind faith, in life in general, in the universe, and God, again, Larry from the convenience store, whoever you believe in, right?
Mhm.
And I just but I kept going. I kept one baby step at a time, just like I had to do with self-care. One baby step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are today, here we are today. And honestly, Lance, I feel like it's just beginning. I feel like it's just beginning. And I'm so excited to be able to share not only with companies that are just starting out, but companies who are needing to rebrand or have growth spurts, and family caregivers who are just starting to speak up. I'm so excited to share, what it was like, and that they can do this, that it can be different, and it can grow, and it can be powerful and make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's play a little fortune teller here. And what
Okay.
what would you say is next for Keys for Caregiving if you could see the company, say, 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I would definitely see that we have expanded quite a bit. There are quite a few people that we've engaged in bringing and doing the same thing I'm doing, all over, so we can help many, many more caregivers, and lift them up and let them know that their voice matters, right? Engage many more people across the United States to say, hey, these caregivers have a story, right? Be able to engage much more press, media, and film, on being able to tell the real story for family caregivers, and engage more companies on how to really, really expand their reach on working with family caregivers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. Want to thank you again for being with us today, Christina. I know how busy you are, and now with the launch of Keys for Caregiving, you're even busier. But if you could, before we part here and wrap up, give me your top three, top five tips that you would want to share with every family caregiver.
First of all, I find support, right? Find support. Again, that could be listening to podcasts, finding a support group on social media, finding a care coach, finding a therapist. That would be one of the main things. If you don't know how to find local resources in your city, the quickest way to do that is find one. And when you call them, ask what other resources they recommend or they know of. When you call that second one, ask them the same thing. The third one would be, listen, you are doing an amazing job. If you're a family caregiver, whether you believe it or not, I'm here to tell you, you are doing an amazing job,
Hmm.
and you're not alone. There are many of us out there.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. one of my personal favorites, and it kind of ties into all of those, is just first and foremost, take care of yourself. Because if, like when you were taking care of your mom, if your health became, so, I guess, declined or, compromised, who would have been there for your mom?
Exactly.
And I just stress that to families that we meet with daily. It's not being selfish. You're not being greedy. You're not being negligent. You're being smart, and that is giving your loved one a gift, because with your health in, the best condition as it can be and being attended to, you can then continue to take care of them. But if you fall because you're sick and you're laid up in the couch or have to go in the hospital or whatever the case may be, you're not going to be any good to anyone, let alone your loved one. So, take that time. If it's 5-10 minutes a day, if it's one day a week, or whatever works best for you, make sure you're taking it, because they're going to need you at your best so that you can continue to take care of them.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, Lance, the care that I gave my mother when I was constantly focused on her 24/7, like I completely forgot about myself, no self-care. It was not as good as when I was taking care of myself also. Like me and my mom were both happier when I was taking care of myself. Trust me, I'm pretty sure I annoyed the heck out of my mom when it was all about her. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Christina Keys, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. We're thankful for your friendship and everything you're doing for family caregivers and the caregiving community. Looking forward to many more conversations with you in the future.
So grateful for you, Lance. Thank you so much for having me on today.
It's our pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. A lot of people ask me, because I have a lot of energy, little do they know I'm exhausted. A lot of people ask me what keeps me going, what drives me in all the work that I do. I even had one of my mentors ask me the other day, what do you do for fun? I'm like, well, I help this caregiver and I do this with I just love caregivers so much. And the reason why I love them is because, I went through that journey with my mother for almost 10 years. I went through that journey with my ex-boyfriend, from 2019, and I still help with some of his care now. And I know what it's like to be a family caregiver. I know what it's like to wake up in the morning when you feel like you can't get out of bed, but you get out of bed for love because somebody you are caring for needs you. Those nights that we go to sleep and we're exhausted and, we question everything we did throughout the day, and the times that we have to advocate for our loved ones when the doctors don't seem to be listening for us. We do so much for our loved ones. We do more for our loved ones than we would do for ourselves. And those caregivers, they are my heroes. I work with a ton of great, amazing people in the care space. And I also, lead a team of over 100 current and former family caregivers. But I got to tell you, all of those people, whether they're a caregiver just starting out or a caregiver who's been in the care space for a long time, they're secretly, they're all my heroes. I mean, it's not a big secret, but all my heroes. And I look up to all of them because they all inspire me, because I know what they go through. I know how hard it is for you to get out of bed. I know how your heart is breaking, but you're still showing up every day because you love someone and you care for them. I know how confused you are and you're just trying to figure it out, but you'll try anything to make it happen for the person you love. I have so much respect for family caregivers, and I'm so honored to be one of you also.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to our friend Christina Keys for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.